She arrived flanked by three men I'd never laid eyes on before. They were broad-shouldered, mean-faced types who climbed out of her SUV like they owned the whole block. Marla jabbed a finger toward my house and barked, "That man refuses to join the neighborhood council. Make him sign today, or drag him out." One of the bruisers cracked his knuckles, smiling like the fight was already won. My shepherd, a retired police dog, stood stiff on the porch with teeth bared and a deep growl rumbling in his chest. They laughed at him, calling him a mutt, but I didn't share their amusement. Leaning against the doorframe, one hand resting on the shotgun beside me, I spoke evenly. "Set 1 foot past that line, and you'll regret it. Tag your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels." Marla curled her lip, clutching a phony council binder like it was gospel. "You're standing on association property now." "My rules apply here," she shouted, though her voice had the faintest tremor. The biggest of her men stepped closer, and my dog lunged forward, barking so violently that he stopped dead in his tracks. I watched doubt spread across their faces like a slow leak. That's when Marla pulled a fake legal notice from her folder and slapped it against my gate. "You're evicted, effective immediately," she announced, waving the paper as if it held real weight. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled and said, "Interesting, because the sheriff already knows you're trespassing." Just then, the distant wail of sirens rolled through the air. Marla's false confidence fractured. Her hired muscle turned to her for direction, but now her face had gone pale. She hadn't expected me to call for backup before she arrived, and she definitely hadn't expected who was about to show up. A patrol cruiser skidded to a stop behind her SUV, red and blue lights painting the street. Marla froze like a deer caught in headlights, though the thugs still tried to act tough, puffing up their chests like nothing was wrong. The sheriff stepped out, hat tipped low, hand resting casually near his holster. Marla hurried toward him, her voice shrill and desperate. "Officer, arrest this man. He's refusing to follow community law, and he threatened us with a firearm." The sheriff didn't even acknowledge her at first. Instead, he walked straight toward me, offered his hand, and said loud enough for everyone present to hear, "You doing all right here?" Marla's jaw hit the pavement. She stammered, "What? Why are you siding with him? He's breaking every rule." The sheriff finally turned toward her, his gaze like steel. "Ma'am, there is no neighborhood board here. This property falls under county authority, and I've already warned you once about pretending to be an official." One of the hired men tried to butt in. "She says he's trespassing." But the sheriff cut him off, pulling a file from the passenger seat of his cruiser. He unfolded a document, raising it high enough for all to see. The property deed, my name printed clearly, sealed and certified. "This man owns every inch of this land, lawfully and outright," he said. Marla's face drained to a sickly pale. She lunged toward the paper, but the sheriff snapped it out of reach. "Touch this again," he warned, "and you'll face a charge for tampering with evidence." The block fell completely silent. Only my shepherd's low, steady growl broke the hush. One of the muscles shifted uneasily, suddenly aware they weren't enforcers, just pawns. And Marla? For the first time, she looked like the one about to be thrown off the property. Her voice cracked as she tried to claw back control. "Sheriff, you don't understand. He threatened me. He waved a loaded gun at us. He was ready to shoot." She clutched her chest like a helpless victim, and her men quickly joined the performance, nodding along. "Yeah, he aimed right at us." The sheriff didn't blink. He turned to me instead and asked evenly, "You still have the recording?" I smiled, reached into my pocket, and handed over my phone. Marla's eyes went wide. "Recording? What recording?" The sheriff tapped the screen, and beneath the glow of patrol lights, the video rolled. There was Marla, pulling up to my gate, barking orders, sending her hired muscle toward my porch while I stood calmly, shotgun lowered the entire time. Then, in perfect clarity, Marla slapped a forged eviction notice on the gate, her own voice ringing out, "Make him sign, or drag him out." The sheriff turned the volume up so the growing crowd of neighbors peeking from porches could hear every word. A ripple of whispers spread. Across the street, someone muttered, "She's been lying from the start." Marla's carefully built mask shattered, panic flooding her expression. She lunged for the sheriff's hand as if she could snatch the phone away, but my dog surged forward, barking with such force that she stumbled backward into one of her own hired men. The sheriff clicked his handcuffs open with a practiced snap. That's enough. Enough lies, enough scams, impersonation, harassment, trespassing. How deep do you really want to dig this hole, Marla? For the first time, she had nothing to say. She just stood there trembling as her hired muscle began to edge backward, clearly realizing they'd been dragged into something far larger and far uglier than they'd agreed to. The sheriff didn't cuff her immediately. Instead, he reached into his folder and drew out another document, this one stamped with the county seal. Holding it up so everyone could see, he announced, "Marla has been sending fake council notices for months. I've got a stack of complaints on my desk from right here in this neighborhood. She's been extorting people with bogus fines and threats of eviction." A ripple of disbelief swept through the growing crowd at the end of the street. "She took $200 from me over a lawn violation," one neighbor shouted. "She padlocked my garage until I paid her cash," yelled another. The sheriff's jaw clenched. That money didn't go to any association. It went straight into her personal bank account. Marla's eyes darted frantically from side to side, searching for a way out. That's not true," she sputtered. "They're lying. This is defamation." But even her hired muscle was stepping away from her now, recoiling as if she carried a contagious disease. One of them muttered under his breath, "Lady, you never said this was illegal." The sheriff took a slow step closer, his voice dropping low but still loud enough for every ear on the block. "You tried to run a fake government under my jurisdiction. That ends tonight." Then he glanced back at me and gave a small nod. "You've shown more patience than most would have." Marla shook her head wildly, voice rising into a panicked screech. "You can't arrest me. I am the council. I make the rules here." But no one, not the deputies, not the neighbors, not even the men she'd brought with her, was buying the act anymore. The neighbors who had once watched silently were now recording every second. And for the first time, Marla understood her power had vanished. Not because of me, not even because of the sheriff, but because her web of lies had finally wrapped around and caught her. Her eyes darted wildly, like a cornered animal's. Suddenly, she snatched the bogus binder from her SUV and hoisted it above her head. "This is legal authority," she screamed. Then, in a move no one saw coming, she hurled the binder at my dog. He dodged effortlessly, teeth flashing, but the sight alone made the entire crowd gasp. "Enough!" the sheriff barked, stepping forward. But Marla wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and yanked out a flimsy plastic badge, waving it high like it was solid gold. "See? I'm authorized, deputized by the county," she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation and hysteria. The sheriff stared at the badge for a beat, then laughed, a sharp, cold sound that sliced through the air. "That's a toy store trinket," he said, "and you just added impersonating a peace officer to your list of charges." He held up his own badge beside hers. The contrast was humiliating, almost absurd. Dozens of phone cameras caught the moment from every angle. Marla lunged toward me, reaching for my shotgun, as if she could somehow twist the narrative, but my shepherd sprang between us, forcing her back. She stumbled into the dirt, clutching the fake badge as sweat streaked her flushed face. This time, the sheriff didn't wait. He grabbed her wrists, snapped the cuffs closed, and read her rights loud enough for the entire block to hear. The hired muscle stood frozen until the sheriff turned his icy stare on them. "You boys planning to go down with her?" he asked. They raised their hands immediately, backing away. "We didn't know she was lying," one stammered. "We're done here." The street buzzed with energy, neighbors cheering, phones rolling, the illusion of Marla's authority shattered in a single instant. And yet, I knew she still had one last card left to play. Even with the cuffs biting into her wrists, her mouth wouldn't stop. She twisted around, eyes burning with venom. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You think locking me up changes anything? I have people above the sheriff, real people." Her words dripped bitterness as she snapped, "Give me my phone." The sheriff shook his head firmly. Not happening. But one of the deputies who had just arrived reached into her purse and retrieved the phone anyway, citing it as potential evidence. Marla's lips curled into a sly grin. "Perfect. Then put it on speaker. Let everyone hear." Against his better judgment, the sheriff did. Maybe to finally end her circus once and for all. Marla dialed quickly, muttering under her breath, "You'll regret crossing me." The line clicked, and a man's voice answered on the other end. Marla, what now? I told you to keep things quiet. The entire crowd fell silent. They're arresting me! Marla shouted into the phone. You promised me protection. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Who is this? He demanded. The man on the line gave a strained, uneasy laugh, then hung up abruptly. But the damage was already done. His voice had carried over the speaker, and half the people on the block recognized it instantly. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Wait, wasn't that Councilman Hargrove? Oh my God, that was a county official. The sheriff's expression darkened, his jaw tightening as the reality of just how deep Marla's scheme ran began to settle over the stunned neighborhood. Tag your city below. Let's see how far this story travels.